But both the first reading and the gospel make reference to the lands of Zebulun and Naphtali. As people who have walked in darkness have seen a great light. Now, Isaiah speaks of them in that first reading, and then the Gospel of Matthew picks up that verse from the Old Testament at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, stating that Jesus is the fulfillment of this prophecy. So who are these people who settled in these lands? And why would they be connected to Jesus? And more importantly, what do these people who live in these territories have to say about us today? Firstly, who are these people? The lands of Zebulun and Naphtali were named after the 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel. So the promised land was given to the 12 sons of Israel, also known as Jacob, because you have Jacob and is the same one, Israel. The order goes, Abraham had a son, he named him Isaac. Isaac had a son, he named him Jacob. And then Jacob had 12 sons, and they became 12 tribes of Israel. And Jacob changed his name, or his name was changed after Jacob had a struggle with the angel, of God overnight, and then became Israel. So that's how the 12 tribes of Israel. So the two of Jacob, or Israel's sons, settled in the land up north. So you're familiar probably by now with the map of Israel. You know that the northern part, near the border of where the Gentiles were, so way up north, which is also near the Sea of Galilee. And the problem with being on the border is that they're often the first to suffer from any attacks from the enemies of Israel. I think we're very familiar with that now. Not much has changed. And so at that time, the Assyrians and then the Babylonians were enemies to Israel, would obviously approach from there. So also being on the border, it's very easy to interact with the people on the other side of the border, the Gentiles. And so they were known, these people then who lived in that area were known to suffer kind of spiritual decay, because they had impure faith after a while. They polluted their faith with these pagans and these other people who are on the other side. Not just because they intermingled with these nations, but they were also up north. So they were far from the temple, far from Jerusalem. As you know, the heart of the faith. It's like anyone who's far away from any church or anything like that, faith sort of starts to dwindle. So they were very vulnerable to the invasions, and they were very easily assimilating or mixing into these other faiths, these other pagan religions. And so therefore, in the book of the prophet Isaiah, there's a promise that from there will come the great light, right? That will light in their darkness. There are people who have walked in darkness, but they will see a great light. So the yoke, it says, that burdened them. The pole that they had on their shoulders, when you carry things with a pole, or the rod of their taskmasters, those who kind of in slavery, they know they will beat them. These will all be smashed. They will all go away. This slavery that they live will end, and from them will come the great light. This is the area from which Jesus comes. Right? The gospel says that after John was arrested, Jesus went to Galilee and lived at Capernaum by the Sea of Galilee, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. So from the dark lands filled with suffering and unfaithfulness to God and confusion, a great light will come. And Jesus did come to remove the slavery to sin, to find the lost, to teach the right faith, and to be the way, the truth, and the life. And he came from this dark place to bring the light of faith and to bring them back to God. That same message given to these territories continues in our day. The image of light and darkness, these are deep symbols that are in our very being. We experience them every day. The darkness of night, the morning, and the light returns. We speak, though, because it's a part of us, in many other ways using darkness and light, like the darkness of sin and corruption, abuse and addiction. These things thrive in the darkness, right? The feeling of being lost, the wandering around aimlessly, being confused or lonely or cold. The dark is cold. And then we use that image of darkness. People often speak as being in the dark and living through some very dark times in their life. And I think everybody in here knows exactly what that means. And the desire for the light, for clarity, for direction, for warmth, for community, for salvation, a desire for the truth. And these are experienced as light in the darkness. And that's what Christ came to bring us, the way, the truth, and the life. And people who live in the light, they feel free. They feel like the yoke that burdened them, or the pole that was on their shoulders, or that they used to carry with loads, or the rod that was used by those who kept them in slavery, that these are all smashed now. They're removed or they're lifted from them. And in the light, there's freedom. Not to do anything you want to do, but to become who God had made you to be. You know, poor Zebulun and Naphtali, they were far from the heart of their faith. Like so many of us today, so far away from God. And they sit on the borders, often assaulted by the world, far from worship, far from God. And they're subjected to so much. But there is light. There's light in the darkness that brings you back to God. God the Father lifts the burden, warms that cold heart, frees you from addiction or confusion or loneliness. Just like in the gospel with Peter and Andrew, James and John, Jesus calls you to follow him. Follow the light. And the stories are many. Speak to people who have experienced this, right? The freedom that they felt after the darkness of an unforgiven sin, right? That from the past, the darkness of addiction or violence. And they'll tell you how Christ freed them from that, that they feel like they're in the light now. They're no longer hidden in the shadows. The big burdens that they carried are lifted through forgiveness and confession. They live a new life for grace. Talk to the people who have lived far from God, if maybe even some of you at one time in your life. And you took on the worldly values, polluted the faith you had through neglect or just assimilating things. It's amazing the number of Catholics who all of a sudden start believing in reincarnation or tarot cards or the occult just because they're close to the border and they interact and assimilate that into their faith. Even use words like karma. You know, mixing with the current fads of the world, and then found themselves lost. They speak of how dark their lives became. You know, we believe that Christ is the light in the darkness, and he brings light to the dark parts of our lives, even today. Christ brings freedom and life, love, selflessness, community, forgiveness, mercy, and grace. Grace when he calls us out of darkness, the darkness from our lives, and to move toward the light. And heaven is often, the fullness of this is often found as moving toward the light. We all know the stories of those, a near death experience of that there's a light there, and they move toward the light. They're drawn toward it. Do not be afraid to ask God to bring light to any time of testing and pain, confusion and addiction, any other darkness that envelops you, and ask him to shine the light on it. And remember that there are forces in this world that benefit tremendously by keeping you in the dark. The truth of that is to welcome the light. the light and watch for the light. And more importantly, to move away from darkness into the light that first shined in the darkness of Zebulun and Naphtali.